Landlords, what is the stupidest reason you've had to evict someone? I can answer that. Tenant was growing weed in the house. Other tenants were complaining. Called in and told him to get rid of it. I don't care about it being illegal, it is where I am. But I take the complaints from the other tenants seriously. He said he would. Couple of days later the other tenants call and say the plant is still there. So I met him and said if you don't get rid of the plant now, I'm calling the cops. He said call them. So I did. Arrested and evicted in one easy motion. What an idiot. LOL. What a dumbass. They built a turtle habitat without permission in the basement. Heard this story secondhand from a friend who knows the tenant. They started a turtle breeding business, so they decided to flood the basement with maybe 6 inches of water. The entire basement. It was a concrete floor, but there was still drywall on the wall. Don't know how the landlord found out, or how long they had the habitat, but he kicked them out immediately. No notice. It was either leave now or he'd sue for damages. Next day they were out. This is so far the most underrated response to the question. I mean it involves a turtle habitat. Not a landlord, but I knew a guy in college that moved into an off-campus apartment with his friends. Because he was completely broke and irresponsible, he didn't add himself to their lease in an attempt to avoid fees for additional occupants, and he didn't pay rent to his roommates. About a year later, his friends graduated and moved out, and they gave him plenty of warning so that he could get his crap together and move out. He did exactly nothing. The landlord came and told him that he had to vacate because the lease had ended, which led to the dumbest excuses I've ever heard in my life. Well, this isn't my apartment, so it's not my job to pay rent. I just live here. Later on Facebook, he tried to twist this into a sob story. Can you believe they just evicted me? If he wasn't on the lease and all the people on their lease had moved out, he's lucky they evicted him and didn't have him arrested for squatting. Guy got evicted from university housing because he was using the fire sprinkler head as the end point of a clothesline. This broke the sprinkler head, flooded half my floor, 4th floor, and every apartment underneath down to the base level. I work in insurance, specifically subrogation. You have no idea how many sprinkler head claims we get. Cause some dumbass guests in a hotel hung their clothes on it. I had a claim that I had pics of the hanger on the sprinkler, literally above a sign that says don't hang clothing on this. People are freaking stupid. Had to evict someone for not using the shower curtain. They took a long shower and flooded their bathroom, which ran down and flooded the apartment below them. We lost the downstairs tenant as well. Plus insurance wouldn't cover the damages since it wasn't from a burst pipe or other plumbing issue. Then when they were evicted they asked for their damage deposit back. We lost the downstairs tenant as well. Dang, you really buried the lead there. Drowned by his upstairs neighbor. What a way to go. My dorm mate freshman year got evicted for rolling through the hallway on an office chair blasting a big fire extinguisher. What an absolute madlord. My sister used to have some duplexes she rented out. One tenant was several months late on payments and numerous times the tenant promised she was working on getting the money. My sister was being nice because the tenant was in a hard spot and recovering. One day she went by to visit and the tenant had a brand new tattoo sleeve all the way down her arm. When confronted about why the money wasn't used to pay rent, the tenant said they really wanted the tattoo. The eviction process started immediately. New tattoo or pay the rent. My welfare check was quickly spent. Not a landlord, but when I was living in a dorm there was a mysterious case of small plastic bags filled with poo appearing on a tree in front of the dorm building overnight. How did they get there? A foreign student seemed to have had some kind of toilet shyness and didn't want to use the shared dorm restrooms, so he did his business into small plastic bags. He then decided, instead of discarding those bags discreetly, to just throw the bags out of his window into the tree at night. This didn't go well with the facility management of the dorm and he lost his dorm room. My dad was a landlord and one of the tenants tore out the cabinet doors and replaced them with chicken wire and put chickens in the cabinets. What the frick? Tenant left all the windows open in rainstorms apparently and didn't clean up water that blew in, and every single window in the house was rotted and had black mold. They asked for their deposit back. God. And to think I felt guilty asking for my last deposit back because the landlord gave me crap about a 2-inch stain on the carpet near the front door. I'm not a landlord but a property manager, so manage properties on behalf of landlords. We had a group of tenants that climbed out of their kitchen window to smoke on the flat roof outside. Fell through and caused tons of damage to the shop immediately below, then attempted to have a pop at us as we never informed them that they couldn't climb out of the window. Later that tenancy, one of the same tenants, there were 4 total, 2 involved in the roof thing, put a pan on the hob then forgot about it, which set fire to the kitchen. They complained that the ash aggravated their asthma. They didn't seem to understand why their tenancy wasn't renewed and why we kept their deposit. My landlord had to evict the 2 young men living in the basement apartment. They got into a habit of terrorizing the poor old lady living on the first floor, and they would also always turn the heat of the building up to 45°C. It was a huge fire hazard. Let's say we were happy they left. The heat control for the whole building shouldn't be accessible to the tenants. My dad's the landlord but I'm technically second voice of the property. We own the house next door for renting purposes. This tenant was the definition of I'll pay you eventually. She only talks to my dad if she needs help, otherwise she avoids us. But I'll get back to that. This woman had a dog and all that time we thought it was hers. She treated it like garbage. Barely took care of it. One day she left this little puppy in the snow and my mom was furious. Before we could call over the dog to give him some warmth, the tenant walked out, grabbed him and slammed the door. She would keep using pet fees as an excuse to hold off on rent, and we learned that A, she was lying, and B, the dog wasn't even hers. From what I put together, she held her ex's dog hostage and took it out on him by not taking good care of him. My dad, after realizing it, went to confront her and she hid from him, then drove away, claiming she had a party to go to. My dad blocked the driveway with his car and said he's move it once she pays her rent. She was so hysterical, it got to the point where she got her dad involved, but he ended up taking our side. Her dad paid the rent, sent the dog back, and we were done with her. My husband and I just bought a new rental and had to evict one of the tenants because they were running an illegal water ice business out of the home. The previous owner had to pay user occupancy fines before the sale could clear, and we didn't want to risk being on the hook for those same fines when the tenant inevitably started the business up again. I helped my father evict a tenant from the second house he owned and was renting out. The house had a small secure garage attached to it, but rather than use this to repair his motorbikes, the tenant had 3 of them inside the house, 2 in the living room, in bits, and 1 in the spare room upstairs, also in bits. Oil everywhere. He'd spilt at least 1 gallon of oil downstairs which had soaked into the carpet and floor underneath. He'd taken the carpet up and thrown it in the garden. Upstairs there were numerous small spills. Carpet wrecked again. Dirty handprints all over the doors and walls, especially on the stairwell, kitchen cupboards and so on. We found out as the neighbors were complaining about the smell of petrol. He had a leaking fuel tank in the kitchen, on the draining board. It was very slow, so thankfully he hadn't blown the house up, but the kitchen stank, along with the outside drain. My father had a clause in the rental agreement that specifically prohibited any kind of workshop type activity in the house. No woodwork, pottery, engine repairs etc. So it was fairly easy to evict him. Took 2 months. He didn't even ask for his deposit back and left 2 of the bikes behind. 2 crappy old Hondas that were beyond repair. My father sold them for a few quid to help pay for the repairs to the house. Not a landlord but a tenant. My girlfriend and I just moved from a place with a year lease that was a duplex. It had 4 apartments, all 1 bedroom, and ours was the biggest. We were really cool with the landlord and always paid rent on time. The landlord had some crazy stories, but one happened while we were living there. I guess this dude moved into one of the apartments upstairs. After a few weeks, we never heard noises coming from upstairs and his light would be on 24/7. Next thing we know, I had a guy knock on my door asking if we could help him move some of his daughter's things into that same apartment. I obliged because moving sucks and it was only a few items. Just awkward for one person. Well, next time we paid rent, the landlord stopped by and asked if we heard any noises coming from upstairs because that guy had gone to jail. The guy who I helped moved his daughter's things into the apartment had called our landlord and said he moved his daughter's things in there because they were dating. It came down to the landlord just having to let her live there for a few weeks because it would have been more costly and time consuming than just evicting her. I thought that was crazy. She kept shutting off the power to the Airbnb unit above her. Also, she assaulted an Airbnb guest. That was pretty dumb of her. Not the landlord. Son of the landlord. Parent had to evict tenants because they kept damaging stuff in the house, then taking my parent to court to demand it be fixed. One tenant is now in jail for breaking back into the house to rob me after being evicted. Not much of a silver lining, but the dude in jail didn't have to worry about rent for a while. Obligatory, not a landlord, but my dorm mate got evicted for getting really drunk, having to throw up, not wanting to do it in the toilet, and against me and my friend telling him not to, smashed the window and puked out the window onto a car. Kicked him out, but not me and my friend, meaning we had to pick up extra rent money. Every tenant we've evicted was for not paying rent for 3+ months. And since in our country, the electric bill has to be in the property owner's name, we get to pay their electric bills as well, or the next tenant wouldn't have electricity. Our second to last tenant abandoned a cat at the apartment, so we had to deal with a cat and cat crap and cat food scattered around the place. The last tenant randomly brought home a huge butt dog, no yard, that they never walked and just left on the terrace all day and night. The dog destroyed the walls on the terrace, some walls inside the apartment, and the walls on the rooftop patio. We also had to clean the massive amounts of dog crap and pee left everywhere. I hate being a landlord. Something makes me think that running background checks and references would minimize all of that nonsense. Not the landlord, but a friend of mine just had to evict someone from a home she owned after the following convo. T equals tenant, F equals friend, comma T. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up that money is pretty tight RN, so won't be able to make rent this month, comma F. Okay, as per our contract, you technically have until the 3rd to pay, and it doesn't accrue late fees until the 5th, comma T. Oh, sorry, I should have been more clear. I won't be able to afford rent at all this month, comma F. I mean, each day after the 5th is $50 in late fees. Do you know when you'll be able to pay, comma T. As per my text, I won't be paying rent this month. Took her a couple weeks to get a court date, but said tenant is now out of the property with a shitload of bills now in collections. I know landlords have it tough, but $50 a day in late fees is kinda crazy. If your paychecks just happen to line up poorly in a month, then you just get fricked into a hole you can't dig out of. Not a landlord, but I used to work in a large hotel that was connected to a high-rise apartment building. I saw someone get evicted because they made a homemade jacuzzi with an inflatable pool that burst and flooded several apartments below. This thread is testament to the reason I will never become a landlord. A few times in my 50 years, people have approached me about buying a property jointly and then renting it out. One fellow tried selling me his rental property. All I need is to read threads like this to be convinced that I never want that headache. I currently have a tenant who hasn't paid rent in 3 months. Come Friday it will be 4 months. We have to wait until December to have the hearing to decide whether he will be evicted. He won't, I promise, and at that point he will owe me 5 months rent. My parents were landlords in Canada. My dad once gave a dude that was always late on rent, sold drugs and had the cops to the building all the time 10 grand to just go away so the other tenants wouldn't all move out. Not the landlord and not me, but a distant relative I have was evicted because he started to breed dogs in his family cottage. He wasn't supposed to be in the family cottage at the time as it's only a 3-season cottage in a remote part of Ontario, and he's not a dog breeder in the slightest. He's actually a chef. So when they came to open up the cottage for winter and found him, his new girlfriend and 40 puppies in the cottage with destroyed floors, they were quite surprised. He's a chef. Obviously he was running an illegal dog meat farm. Worked in university housing. Girl got kicked out because she wouldn't stop smoking in her room. It's dumb, because she was a few steps from a door outside, and she had been told to stop and been fined at least a dozen times. Just wouldn't stop. I had to evict my tenants so because they were throwing roadkill over the fence, threatening to burn the neighbor's house down, was naked on the roof, put a hole through my wall, put all my furniture, it's a furnished rental, on the lawn, several times. Did something in the master closet, unidentifiable stain, openly did them in the backyard, broke a window. They didn't show up to the hearing both no one could find them to serve them. I knew they were sleeping in the abandoned lot next to Walmart but no one asked me. I'm not the landlord but I have an eviction story so please don't hate me. My wife and I bought a house 2.5 years ago. Before we moved in it was a rental property and the previous tenants had been evicted. As soon as we moved in the neighbors told us the stories about the renters. They owned animals, lots of them, usually between 10-12 dogs and about 3 cats. When the previous owner came to inspect the property he immediately evicted them because they had been allowing the animals to destroy the place. The owner had to have much of the drywall, carpeting and flooring replaced. The old stuff was put in a dumpster in front of the house and the neighbors said you could smell it for miles. Not a landlord, but while I was a case manager I had a few folks get evicted for odd reasons. 1. Evicted because he was running the shower non-stop to humidify his apartment. He believed that it was his right, since hot water was included in his rent. His apartment was so humid that he had both mold and mushrooms growing in every corner. The building's water bill had increased by $500 in the 3 months he lived there. 2. Several times, clients have sold the apartment's fridge and stove for drug or gambling money, and one person sold them to pay the rent. 3. Evicted because he went all Sheldon Cooper and vandalized a car that was in his assigned parking spot. He did not own a car. 4. Evicted because she had about 20 live chickens in her 10th floor urban apartment. For food, not pets. 5. Evicted because client's mom was sexually harassing the landlord. She was arrested several times for disrespecting the POP and restraining orders. Also had a client get evicted for trying to exchange sexual favors for rent. 6. Evicted for peeing everywhere except the toilet, which was in pristine, mint condition when he left. So many questions. Was the chicken lady slaughtering the chickens in her apartment too? They must have pooped everywhere too. I will never understand people. Had to evict a guy because he believed that he could set the price of his rent to whatever he wanted. It doesn't work that way. Rent prices aren't negotiable. Rent prices aren't negotiable. The last place me and a buddy of mine were renting were begging us to stay after we told them we're moving. They were trying to bargain us with lowered rent. The house was actually in better condition when we moved out. Anything can be negotiable in the right circumstances. My dad used to own a large farm property across the road from us. It was about 100 acres of just empty land with a house by the road. A local buffalo farmer, yes that is a thing apparently, was renting the land for the buffalo while someone else was renting the house to live in. Mr. Buffalo Farmer kept mentioning the general disrepair the tenants were keeping the house in and the large amount of garbage piling up behind the house. IDK how it is now, but Canadian law back then was heavily in the tenants' favor so we really couldn't do anything about it. Evicting people takes years and they never seemed to be home or answer the phone, which made contacting them difficult. Finally one night the trash pile caught fire and almost burned the house down and the fire department discovered a grow up in the basement when they went in to check the house. They weren't actually living there, they were just growing weed, which was still highly illegal back then. The house has since been demolished. A guy I went to high school with rented a flat with some friends for his first year of university, and they decided to throw a beach themed flat warming party. They got a load of sand and spread it around the carpeted living room. The party got out of hand and when the landlord came and found the carpet full of sand they were evicted, and since they couldn't find somewhere else to live he dropped out of university. The best part was to get rid of the sand they dumped it through the gaps in the decking. 6 months later he got another bill because the decking foundations had rotted away. I own a holiday house in another country, rented out through an agency. There's an option to rent it out for longer periods during the off season, and this trust fund wannabe artist stayed for 16 months over 3 years. He was overly dramatic and needy and caused the agency quite a bit of headache. This will turn into a novel if I go in details. He was officially evicted and banned from the place when he decided to paint a mural on the living room wall. He threatened to sue the agency if they don't compensate him for his work and caused so much drama that he got escorted by the police. My dad owns a duplex. A few years ago, he had this tenant that was pretty quiet and introverted. Well, one day, the cops kicked his door in with a warrant for his computer, and they found a frick load of child pee on his hard drive. Guess who got to install a new exterior door? She didn't pay her portion of Section 8. The rent was $1,500. Section 8 paid $1,450. She couldn't pay $50 a month. Crap, I wish my rent was $50. Had a family of 4 move in. They started parking their car, then cars on the lawn and not on the driveway. They acquired additional cars. Other family members moved in. Daughter got pregnant and gave birth to twins. This is a 3-bedroom, 1,500 square house. There were now 11 people living in the house. They would not take out garbage and just drop it on the ground. When their toilets clogged, the plumber refused to do work when he has seen their living conditions. They were blasting music so loud that other neighbors fed up with them actually came to attack the tenants as they were seriously impacting their life. It has gotten so bad in the second year that once the sheriff has gotten to evict them, they were stunned. They did pay their rent on time though, most of it being from a voucher off Sec. 8. I'm surprised there wasn't an anonymous tip to children's services if there were newborn twins living in those kinds of conditions. Only my third so far, so may not sound that stupid, but here goes. Resident signed her lease when we were running 1/2 off first month's rent special. Moved in, paid all her money. Next month she paid rent. The next month she didn't pay. Sent her the legal 3-day notice and she called complaining that she got a free month of rent. Read her lease out to her. She still didn't believe me but gave up. Said she'd have money by the end of the month. Okay, we'll work with her. Kept paying late. Almost sent to evictions, then she got caught up. Then she stopped paying again. Almost sent to evictions and lo and behold, she gave her notice. Okay, we'll just send any remaining debt to collections. No big deal. She turned in her keys. We went to inspect and there was a man asleep in the living room. Told him to get out, but turns out he was the boyfriend and was living with her and had no idea she moved out. Well, he's not on the lease, so guess who's going to eviction finally? She probably thinks she left him there high and dry to deal with us, but nope. She is the one that's going to face legal troubles. I guess it is not a stupid reason, but I once had a tenant doing C in the 4th bedroom, a finished basement. I was cutting the guys living there a deal and allowed an additional person to move in if they were all cool with it. They were cool until he started ripping C on a semi-regular basis. Some of the guys decides to move out to not be around it and paid to get out of the lease. So I just evicted that guy since he wasn't in the lease and started from fresh. A real pain in the butt, but I have a much better family living there now. So I guess it all worked out for the best. Not a landlord, but my landlady shared this story with me. One of her tenants had left an aerosol can on top of the stove while she was cooking. The heat caused the gases in the can to expand and explode, causing $40,000 worth of damage to the property. Said tenant said she couldn't understand why she was responsible for paying the damages instead of the insurance company. Not me, but my mum had to evict someone because they were cutting holes in the blinds so they could see their people on their front porch. There was also a lot of sea residue found all over the couches, tables and beds. They also had a 2-year-old child. Freaking heck. This was a good read, but god dang. How hard is it to be good people and pay your crap in a timely manner? My husband and I are newly homeowners. We were renters 2 years ago. I think in the time span of 3 years of renting the house we were late on our rent maybe twice and only by a few days. Once we moved out we cleaned the house top to bottom including the yard. So much so that we not only got our whole security deposit back, but received a little extra because the yard was cleaner than what we had got it. We lived on a half acre. I cannot for the life of me wrap my mind around these stories. I had to evict this chick out because she made me eat her out while she was on her period. Her boyfriend said, which I wasn't too keen on, but he follow up with she doesn't bath or use toilet paper for anything. For those, I was living with them. House in my name. Thank God I had them on a month-to-month lease. Realizing she touch everything, didn't wash her hands was a no-go. I knew they fought, but now I know why. So end half of the month comes. I told her she needed to be out. She agreed because of the fighting, not how she believed she didn't stink or felt she was dirty. She confirmed what he had said. So end of the month comes. She leaves. He's still there. I remind him he needs to pay for that month rent. He asked for a free month of rent because he was a victim. I said no. He said give him 2 weeks. I said fine. Try to help him find a job. Nothing. I go get a 3-day eviction notice. He left the room trashed. Finger my good peanut butter too. We recently moved out of our house, so we decide to rent it to the seemingly normal family. Husband, wife and 3 children. Welp. Apparently the wife got something going with her own cousin, so when they did a party and he was over, the husband got crazy jealous. He at least shot 8 times inside the house chasing the cousin. The cousin ran away in his car, crashing the neighbors' cars in the process. The police arrived and stole a few things. So does the wife said. When they took the husband away, my parents out of pity decide to give her another chance to stay in the house since the children liked it, with the condition he wasn't allowed to get near the house or live in it. She decided to leave the house since she loved him and knew he wouldn't shoot her. We had to fix multiple walls and doors since the bullets went through them. This all happened in 3 weeks of they moving in. Doctors of Reddit, what was your dumbest RIM Verismit patient experience? Not an MD. I'm an RN that works with oncology, cancer patients, some of which are on clinical trials. I got a patient and, before starting his chemotherapy, reviewed some of his lab work with him. I told him his glucose level was 73. Normal range is usually between 70-100. He got really upset at this point and asked him what's wrong. Your labs are within range, and he said I need it to be 0. I said, what? Why would you want your glucose to be 0? He said he's trying to meet requirements for a new clinical trial that requires his glucose to be 0. I told him, I don't know what clinical trial you're trying to get into, but if your blood glucose was 0, you'll be dead or dying. He was not convinced because I'm just a nurse, so I sent a message to his MD asking them to educate their patients better. Paramedic here. Transported a guy who was adamant about only using homeopathic medicine, natural healthy living, etc., and refusing meds interventions x-rays on this basis. He also smoked a pack a day. The ED doc called him on this nonsense with something along the lines of, you smoke so you're not at homeopathic, you're getting a chest x-ray. Just got this story from my girlfriend's stepdad, who is a neurosurgeon. He had an OBGYN friend who had a couple who couldn't get pregnant. Apparently they had been raised in some religious fundamentalist cult and didn't understand how sex worked. The guy was just rubbing his penis against her leg and ejaculating on her thigh. I had a 350 pounds patient, late 30s, brought in by his sweet old mother because she was concerned about his recent sweats and shakes. Tell me about his high IQ of over 140. I just nodded and ordered a blood panel. When I got back in the room with the results, he was trying to tell me how he knows more than me about everything to do with medicine. I told him I was diagnosing him with new onset diabetes. He couldn't tell me anything about the pathophysiology of diabetes. Then I asked him which IQ test he took and how old he was when he took it. He said it was an online test a few years ago, like on Facebook. He didn't know what a Stanford Binet test was. Had a patient with a HbA1c of 13 who refused all diabetic medications because he believed that he could control his liver's production of glucose with his mind. He believed himself to be very fit and active and felt that with his mental control he was a better athlete than most other people because he could ramp up his glucose production when he needed to. He was in the hospital for a diabetic foot ulcer that required a transmetatarsal amputation. A male patient injected kitchen oil into his own cheeks because he saw a plastic surgery TV show where a surgeon injected something similar to a model. Then he was amazed that the bumps of the oil didn't go away and were turning red and painful. Anytime someone refuses to vaccinate their kids, here's just a small sample of some of the reasons I've been given. 1. Causes autism. 2. Made from aborted babies. 3. Big pharmacy scam. 4. Unnatural. 5. My kid cried when you gave him his vaccines last time. 6. I never got these diseases as a kid, so my kid doesn't need the vaccine. Seriously, frick you people. I feel sorry for your kids. Also, don't forget I've done my research followed by a strong smell of smoke that emanates from them because cigarette smoke isn't dangerous to kids. I've seen that more times than I'd like to admit. Was treating cavities on a very nervous 4-year-old. Had finally gotten into a cooperative groove when Genius Mother looked up from her phone and noticed that I was drilling teeth. She was in the room the whole time. I had reviewed treatment with her. She knew we were fixing cavities. Proceeds to curse me out under her breath saying you're drilling holes in her teeth. This is freaking ridiculous. You people are scammers making holes in people's teeth. I kept my calm and said, Mom, if you have questions I will be happy to answer after I'm finished. I'm shaking with rage at this point because she was 20 minutes late to her appointment and I'm bending over backwards to make sure her kid has a good visit and doesn't end up scared of the dentist. Appointment is over. Kid jumps down, high fives and gives me a big hug, and I turn to Mom and ask her how exactly she thought cavities were fixed. She said, you don't drill. My mother is a dental assistant. I then proceeded to explain in excruciating detail the scientific process of how we remove decay. She said that's not true. I then told her that she can go ask her mom, ask Google, or go to dental school if she wants to know more, but I won't be treating her child anymore. Freaking nutbag. I don't know if this fits perfectly, but a while back I helped open an urgent care for the first 2 years. When we first opened the doors, one of our first customers was an 85-year-old adorable Asian lady who was really hard to understand but talked a lot. Anyway, this lady comes in for the first time complaining of a stomach pain, which we attempted to diagnose her with something, but nothing added up for about 30 minutes to an hour of her talking until she finally told us she just felt better. Okay. So we don't really mind it until next week around the same time she shows up again with the same problem. And guess what the solution was? About 45 minutes of listening to what she ate for dinner the last few nights. I think we eventually figured out corn was messing with her, but this never deterred her from coming in more. This eventually became a once a week occurrence, then a once everyday thing, until we finally started becoming a busy urgent care and we couldn't really fit her inside our schedule. I guess it wasn't really an I am Verismith experience, but I swear this lady actually came in every day thinking she was on the verge of death, until we had convinced her she's fine. In case you're wondering, I'm almost certain she's well over 90 now and still going. Another possibility is that she's faking and just wants someone to talk to. Anytime a patient comes in who is deathly ill and clearly needs antibiotic, cholesterol, blood pressure, etc. meds to get better that tell me I'm not taking the medicine. I know you just prescribe those because the drug companies pay you. Yes, sir lady. All of these drug companies are giving me dollar bills y'all to put you on an antibiotic, cholesterol, blood pressure medicine, etc. Right. I am an ent. I had a patient call me on the weekend once and the conversation went like this. Me, yeah, this doctor, with ent. Some guy, well, my testicles really hurt. I was sure this was a joke. Dude, I am an ears, nose and throat surgeon. Some guy, yeah, I know. I am being treated for a chronic cough. Me, okay. Some guy, well, you know how when you go to the doctor and sometimes they put their finger down there, tell you to turn your head and cough? Me, yeah, they are checking for a hernia. Some guy, so you think me coughing is why my balls hurt? Me, no. Some guy, you sure? Me, how bad do your balls hurt? Yes, I said balls to a patient. Some guy, I can't even put on my underwear. Me, go to the dude. A related story from my friend, a gynecologic oncologist. Basically, a woman had early uterine cancer, but refused surgery. She wanted to explore alternative treatments like coffee enemas and meditation. She somehow managed to get an audience with the Dalai Lama, who told her to go back to Western treatment. This is a story, as told to me by one of the M's in the area. Had a guy present to the requesting an ice chest, ice cooler full of ice. After a lengthy discussion, this is the narrative sorted out as the story was erratic. Guy went to party. Guy met gal. They had fun dancing. She asked him to her place. She asked for some sexy time. She asked to kick things up a notch. He said, why not? She pulled out a syringe and injected a drug into his dong to make him have a harder and longer lasting erection. They proceed to have lots of fun sexy time. A few days later, things are sore. Something's not quite right in the dong. Some red spot starts getting redder, larger, and darker across time. Things start turning black and smelling bad. He decides it's a good time to take some initiative, so he pulls out a knife and starts sawing at his dong to carve out the dead skin. Then, He hits a nerve. At this point, he changed his mind to see if he can fix the issue and covered it in olive oil, then wrapped it in saran wrap. You know, to fix it. Some more time passes, and he goes to the bathroom in a restaurant. He pulls down his pants, and his dong slides off of his pee-tube, urethra, like a corn dog off of a stick, and lands on the floor next to him. He picks up his dong, goes and gets a cup from the vending machine, fills it with ice, and puts his dong in it, to help keep it fresh. He wanders around for a few more days, then decides that his dong cup is getting too smelly, so he goes to owner and asks for an ice chest full of ice. He gets taken to the ER. The docs consult urology, and it turns out that when he goes pee it just flings around everywhere like an unbridled fire hose on full blast. The hospital won't let him keep his dong, as it is a biohazardous tissue at this point, but he won't let the hospital take it until they decide to give him a receipt for a dong. Then the dong is taken to wherever they incinerate dongs, and the dude wound up admitted with a surgical uro consult. Moral of the story: don't inject crap in your junk, even if it is from random strangers for sexy time. Jesus Christ. This one happened to my ex-father-in-law, and it's funny, but it's not. He was a surgeon, very gentle, soft-spoken guy, and came out to tell them the biopsy results. To which they responded, praise Jesus, it's malignant. He had to explain that malignant meant bad. Honestly, that's freaking hilarious. Not for the patient. I'm still just a medical student, but our hospital sees a lot of poor and poorly educated patients since we're a big tertiary hospital in a developing country. Worst I've seen so far are the old ladies who everyone in the family turns to for health advice, their only qualification being seniority. They usually have a bunch of superstitions that end up contributing to the patient's condition in the first place. I once saw a neonate brought to the ER for a really bad oral infection, and the mother clearly hadn't taken a bath since the delivery. It's a common superstition here that mothers shouldn't take a bath a week or so postpartum, so we figured that's the source of the infection. While we're assessing the patient, the doting grandmother in the background decides she has to comment on everything we're doing. Remember, she's probably the one who advised her daughter not to take a bath. I just had to shut her down because A, it was late and people were running out of patients in our understaffed, under-equipped ER. B, they're more worried that pulse oximetry is hurting the baby's tiny whittle toes when there's freaking pus leaking out of the baby's very inflamed salivary glands. I mean, I get that infections like these are a disease of poverty, that their poor education is just indicative of a wider systemic problem that Philippine society fails to address time and again, but by golly does it get annoying. I told a patient's mother that his heart rate sped up in response to pain as a physiologic response. She exploded at me and got very confrontational. Turns out she thought I was saying it was psychological or all in his head. TL. DR. Don't use big words. No, he didn't have a water allergy. That's impossible. He had vomited one time after drinking a lot of water and thought he was allergic to it. Lady walks into the office. I start coughing. The smell of cigarette smoke is so strong on her. Her dry leathery skin cracks while she talks from the years of sun abuse. She tells me, I've stopped using sunscreen because I researched that it causes cancer. Poor old man with an unresectable brain tumor, glioblastoma, was in the ICU after surgery to debulk the tumor. His family included a pediatrician and a cath lab technician. The pediatrician daughter kept trying to get us to give the patient some homeopathic BS medicine that she brought with her because I work at Harvard and we use it all the time there. I'm surprised you don't have it here. I seriously doubted she was truthful about where she worked, and I 100% guarantee that if she worked at any reputable practice they were not treating kids with whatever crock homeopathic BS she was pushing on us. Unless I actually saw her credentials, I doubt her medical credentials. I have had a few family members try to pass along their internet medical degree as an education. Optometrist here. Had a 38-year-old female patient coming in for a routine eye exam. Asked her all the usual background health questions. Saw she had checked off migraines x 20 years on her health history. Whenever anybody mentions they have headaches I always ask for more details. She said she's had migraines every day since high school. I was a bit confused. I said every day and she said yep. I asked further about her diagnosis of these and she said she's just seen regular family practice doctors and even a neurologist. I asked her to describe the headaches in detail. How long they are, where on the head, what time of day, etc. She got irritated with me and said, aren't we supposed to be doing a simple eye exam? These headaches don't have anything to do with my eyes. They are migraines. At that point I stopped asking questions and silently hid my anger with her and just did the eye exam. Near the end of the exam I noticed her optic nerves were swollen. I explained that swollen optic nerves require urgent referral for imaging of the brain. CT, MRI need to be done first and other testing if there is nothing found. They came back clean. I ordered a lumbar puncture after that and her cerebrospinal fluid pressure came back 3x higher than normal. She was put on a medicine to bring it back to normal and her unquestionable diagnosis of migraines that she had every day for 20 years were instantly cured. Sadly, it's possible she was told that by her doctor. I have migraines and my doctor couldn't give less of a crap. Well, they run in your family. It's just genetic. I don't know what I'd have to say to get her to investigate further if I were desperate. A lot of doctors just dismiss them out of hand. I've not had any embarrassment answers in psychiatry, but I did have a patient's dad who was adamant that his son wasn't psychotic. He was just lazy and didn't want to work. I mean, he thought he carried a demonic parasite that drained his soul, but yet. A relative of mine caused 2 other random patients to panic when she told them she had breast cancer. They thought it was highly contagious and were outraged about her being around kids. A patient with HIV verging on AIDS who did not want to take medications for it. Instead he insisted that an alkaline diet and antioxidants would cure him because germs can't live in the presence of oxygen. What antioxidants and alkalinity have to do with increasing the oxygen in his body, I don't understand. Teenage male patient came into the clinic with his girlfriend because he was growing breasts with milk production. Turns out his girlfriend was giving him her female hormonal birth control pills for extra protection. Once had a patient ask for a fecal matter transplant. Legit medical procedure, but they wanted cow fecal matter used. No, just no. They wanted cow fecal matter used. Bulls. I've gotten in debates with patients who have festering foot ulcers about the relative benefit of their dogs licking the wounds to keep them clean. I work in physical therapy and often get expert patients who don't want to trust my judgment as a clinician. They are so certain their doctor gave them instructions that are far from what is clinically safe or recommended. Then when presented with a kind but stern response, they want to make it seem like I haven't been licensed for many years and or maybe an expert in the area. At this point in my career I've seen hundreds of hip and knee replacements and even have spoken to most of the big name orthopedic surgeons in my area. I know what I'm doing and I know what these surgeons expect of me during my physical therapy. If we don't get the right outcomes they will not send patients to us. It's important that we know what we are doing to ensure job security. Had one last week that was giving my co-worker a hard time over their weight-bearing status, so I stepped in and told them that we have to follow the most recent doctor's orders regardless of any verbal orders a patient receives. If the doctor didn't transcribe an order, it's for all intents and purposes not valid. This patient was so sure of themselves, so I called the orthopedist on speaker to confirm the order. The orthopedist was very peeved that they were lying to us and scolded the patient. Apparently they had been pressuring the doctor for increased weight bearing to progress their walking, but the doctor had wanted to play it conservative and limit weight bearing for a few more days, weeks. It was pretty gratifying to watch their reaction and see them scolded for lying. TLDR. Patients can be pains in the asses and not trust your judgment and treatment. Patient was lying and was put on the spot during conference call with doctor, then scolded by doctor for lying. Not a doctor. I'm a doctor of pharmacy and sometimes it can confuse people that may think I'm a medical doctor. Anyway, this story happened a few weeks ago. Had OB nurse call me to talk to her family about vitamin K shots. These are given to newborns to prevent hemorrhages and excess bleeding. Now there is some controversy regarding the practice of giving Vitcon is kinda similar to the anti-vax movement. That's not why the parents were concerned. They read online the shot contained benzyl alcohol. Benzyl alcohol is not uncommon to have in some injections because it inhibits microbial growth to keep it sterile. It is very dangerous for newborns and is never in injections meant for them. The parents didn't know that part. They were upset because they thought that the alcohol is equivalent to giving the baby a full beer and will make it drunk. The parents were in their 40s. I have many more, but this is just one that is more recent. This one woman didn't understand why it was so hard to get rid of her cancer. She said, "Why can't you just find the one big cancer cell in my body and leave all the other ones?" If I could legally share pictures. Late to the party, but had a 63-year-old Asian woman come in with a lump on her breast. She said it had been there for 6 months, but she was treating it with Chinese medicine. She had me 2 weeks before the visit and that's why it's getting worse. I asked her to put on a gown thinking I am going to have to examine the breast to find the lump. The lump found me. 7x9 centimeters. Black, red, inward nipple and raging eczema-like. Paget's of breast. Sent her to breast clinic urgently. My father was an oncologist, and one of his patients was a semi-known religious leader in our country. More of a cult than a religion. TBH. After a round of chemo, said patient threw up, and one of the members of their congregation told them that God had intervened and they had thrown up the cancer. My father tried explaining why this was nonsense, but they nevertheless stopped treatment and told their congregation that God had intervened and destroyed the cancer. Needless to say, they died soon after stopping treatment. I had a morbidly obese patient referred to me for back pain. His MRI showed mostly degenerative changes, and nothing yet surgical. I told him needed to lose weight. My regular doc told me the same thing. Really got on me for my drinking. 2. Said I can't be going out every night after work with my friends for beer, cause it was gonna kill my liver and keep me fat. Oh, so did you follow his advice? I asked. Yup, stopped drinking beer altogether. Now I bring me a 6-pack of that Ensure stuff when we go out. My buddies give me a hard time about it, but I told them I have to do it so I can lose some weight. Yeah. A 6-pack of Ensure every night is much better for your weight than a few cans of Bud Light Fasapam. OMG. So many to choose from. The common ones are anti-vax nutters, especially those who want antibiotics for their spawn's obvious viral illness. Had a parent once tell me I should RX an antibiotic because their kid was unvaccinated. No. People who regularly use alcohol, tobacco, and drugs not wanting to be a pill taker or put unnatural things in their bodies. Opioid addicts who come up with every reason in the book why any pain medicine that is not an opioid is too dangerous to take. This is like saying you're going to swim across shark-infested waters because a well-constructed bridge to walk over them may collapse. However, possibly my most favorite one was this douche who came in because he thought he had appendicitis. Turns out he was actually right in that he did, and it had a microperforation and abscess already on CT because he'd sat on it a couple days. So Mr. Douche had googled it and decided that since in some places they treat appendicitis with antibiotics, he was going to do so for his appendicitis. I explained very patiently for way too fricking long that the research into that only applies to simple early non-abscessed appendicitis and was not appropriately applied to his situation. And I am bitter that I will never get that half hour of my life back. His main reason for wanting to avoid surgery? He didn't want scars on his 6-pack. If you haven't already gotten the picture here, think of the situation from the Jersey Shore. I refused to participate in his stupidity and prescribe antibiotics, so he left against medical advice. Fast forward 2 days. He had purchased fish antibiotics and was taking that to treat his abscessed appendicitis. He now is septic with a fever of 103, a lactate of 6, and systolic BP in the 80s, which is hella sick. Fortunately for him, he was young healthy and it's actually really hard to kill young healthy people. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you have to work really hard. So Mr. Douche pulls through but ends up with a full laparotomy, zipped right down the middle of his 6-pack, instead of the nice little laparoscopy scars he'd have had if he'd come in the first day. It happened almost a year ago. I just finished my MBBS and I was interning at the same hospital I graduated from. As a part of our internship program, I was posted in a small clinic that deals with minor medical issues which don't require any major investigations. So one evening this guy walks in with a complaint of neck pain from morning of that day. After asking a few questions, it was clear that he slept in a weird position which was the cause of the pain. I tried to explain to him that the pain is temporary and there really is no need for him to take any medication. It was a govt clinic and we were running short of supplies. But the guy was adamant on getting a medication. So I prescribed a painkiller. And since this particular painkiller was known to cause gastritis, I also prescribed a drug called ranitidine, sold as a popular brand name called Rantac in India, as well. This guy knew that Rantac was something that doctors prescribe for stomach pain, and he had no idea what the other drug does. But once he saw that I have prescribed Rantac, he threw the prescription literally on the floor and started to complain to the nurse that my friend and I, didn't know anything and that we have prescribed a medicine for stomach pain when his complaint was neck pain. I turned to the nurse and just explained to her why I did what I did, and once he heard that, he silently took his prescription and walked away from there. 911 dispatch call that was transferred to M service. I need an ambulance. Okay, what's the problem? I think I have the flesh-eating bacteria. What makes you say that? Do you have any sores or anything? I went to sleep and woke up with holes in my underwear that weren't there last night. I'm honestly not sure how the EMT operator kept it together on that one. Not a doctor but was discharging a patient and going through his instructions. I advised him to take his antibiotic with food. He asked, should I roll it up in a piece of bread? I told him he could try eating a sandwich instead. Not a doctor but work in pharmacy. An old guy who had got an inhaler prescribed by his GP because he was allergic to his new dog. He came back to the pharmacy and said he was still completely breathless around the dog despite using the inhaler 4 times a day. On further question, it transpired that 4 times a day he was spraying the dog's coat with the Ventolin inhaler. Another gentleman who complained that he was in excruciating pain when inserting his suppositories and physically couldn't get them into his butt. It turned out he wasn't taking them out of the wrapper, which is normally made from really tough foil or plastic. Ouch. How did we ever survive as a species? When a woman in an emergency room told me she wasn't going into labor because her app said she wasn't ready yet, I could see the top of her daughter's head. But what the frick do I know? Keep asking Apple for advice. So I'm not a doctor but a girl I went to high school with is in her 2nd year of med school and still posts anti-vax stuff for all to see. I know someone starting med school soon who believes mental illness is not real and people just need to suck it up. ED. I kept having diarrhea. Told my butt to stop it or I'd stop it my dang self. Now nothing is coming out. It worked. But my stomach hurts a ton now the past week. Got a plain film. Screwdriver in rectum. Handle first. He went to surgery. Once had a patient who took her baby to a chiropractor her friend had told her about. Her baby has a growth defect due to deficiency of growth hormone. She said her chiropractor would adjust it so baby will be happy again. It's comments like these that have made me come to a growing realization that hospitals and clinics might need to have CPS representatives in the building with the ability to suspend people's right to a child if they are putting them at serious medical risk. 60-some YO pancreatic cancer patient wanted to be treated with herbs and natural medicine instead of having the Whipple surgery she needed that could save her life. She let it progress while continuing to have it treated by her natural medicine doc. Finally came around after a few months. She's lucky she survived and went to the operating room. But immediately after surgery and through discharge from the hospital was trying to stay off the bowel regimen and other medications usually given after this type of surgery. Diabetic patient strictly adhered to her diabetic diet by drinking 12 cans of Mountain Dew the past week instead of the usual 24. Police officers of Reddit. What's the stupidest unluckiest criminal you faced? Kid gets arrested for shoplifting and the first thing he says to the cop is I didn't steal that freaking car this morning. The cops originally had zero reason to suspect this kid stole and crashed a car until he said that. It went from misdemeanor to felony in about 2 minutes. The kid distracted the cop from the shoplifting. His strategy worked. Instead of shoplifting on his record, he only has Grand Theft Auto. I was working as a mechanic about 15 years ago. I worked on a Ford Explorer that reeked of weed. Looked in the center console and found a couple of glass pipes and an empty baggie. Fixed the issue it came in for, and the kid that owned it came to pick it up. First thing he does is check the center console. He gets out and says I stole all his weed. My boss comes down and asks if I took it. Nope. Tell him they can check my locker, my toolbox, my pockets, and I'll take a drug test. Not good enough for the kid. He calls the cops to report the theft of his weed. A couple officers actually show up and start investigating. Kid shows them his center console where the weed was, and since I was the only one to work on it, I must have taken it. I told them the same I told my boss. They did a cursory search, went back to the kid and cited him for possession of paraphernalia. I got a random 2 days later. I worked there for about 6 more years. Haha, officers, this guy stole my weed. Look, here's my pipes and stuff, but no weed, so obviously he stole it. Jesus Christ, man. A 911 call from some little kids playing on the phone. The father was asleep and they kept trying to wake him up when the 911 operator asked to speak to an adult. He kept yelling, "No, leave me alone now, we have to send someone since we can't verify there's no emergency." Upon arrival, officers ask for it and the mother has a warrant. One of my co-workers was a passenger in a car. The car got pulled over for some reason. The driver had a suspended license. The cop asked my co-worker if he had a license to drive the car. Sure did. Handed the cop his license. Oops, he had a warrant for failure to appear. Not a cop. Heard a great story from one though. Officer pulled a girl going 15 plus over the speed limit on the highway. After she got her ticket and was free to go, the girl tore off, speeding again, and got pulled by another officer a few miles later. Somehow she still didn't learn her lesson. The third officer to pull her that day arrived at her window nearly crying with laughter, saying, "You do know we have radios, right?" That is amazing. I kinda want to know what they were thinking. Working in a prison, I met a complete idiot who was in for arson and attempted murder. This guy was gay and had been living with his new boyfriend. He also had some mental issues and smoked a lot of weed, which would make him paranoid. He became convinced that his boyfriend was having an affair with a guy who lived in the apartment across the hall. And one day he was home alone and thought he could hear them having a conversation in there. He broke in and found that the guy had just left the TV on. But because he was already in, he thought he'd trash the guy's apartment anyway. He made a mess of the place, then turned the gas on, lined up a bunch of gas canisters and lit a small fire in the dining room. The fire alarms went off. The building was evacuated and the guy went outside with everyone else to wait for the firefighters to turn up. He tried to light a cigarette but realized that he had left his lighter back upstairs, so he went back inside to get it. He made it to his floor just as the apartment exploded and one of the gas canisters he'd left in there flew through the door and hit him in the head. Luckily he'd done a crappy job of trying to cause an explosion. Most of the damage was to his own apartment through a shared wall, and the only person he'd managed to injure was himself. His boyfriend was at work and the guy across the hall wasn't even gay. That sounds like a Lifetime movie villain. Jesus. Or like Home Alone. I'm not a cop, but I recently went to a sheriff training center to take the test to become one. One of the other candidates thought it was a good idea to bring nunchucks. He decided to whip them out and show them off to some deputies who were posted outside the center. He was arrested. One cop walked in and said, "If you think it's a good idea to bring illegal weapons to the cop test, then you may as well not even be here today. I learned nunchucks are illegal in car. The day. Guns legal, nunchucks illegal. America is a strange place." Military police here. I was on patrol by myself working a night shift. I get a call on the radio to head to my squadron to pick up a person that would be riding along with me. As I arrive, I noticed that it was the base commander. He wanted to ride along on patrol and get first-hand look at what his enlisted cops had to deal with on a Saturday night in base housing. This sort of thing never happens. You'll have better odds winning the lottery without playing than for the dang base commander to come out and do this sort of thing. So I pulled up to one of the more famous intersections in the housing area for people running the stop sign. We're sitting in the car and making small talk when he spots a car that didn't make a complete stop. He tells me to stop him and find out what their deal is. He approaches the car with me and we begin to talk to the driver. Instantly I smell alcohol emitting from his breath. I begin to say to myself that this guy is the unluckiest man in the military right now to get pulled over by the base commander while driving drunk. After conducting the standardized field sobriety tests on him and seeing how bad he did on them, he begins to break down emotionally. The base commander gets on the phone with this guy's squadron commander to include everyone in his chain of command and have them meet with him in his office in about 30 minutes. I'm putting the cuffs on this guy with another patrol as my backup when the suspect turns to us and tells us that he was set to retire the following month after 24 years of service. Now I don't know the outcome of this guy's situation, but I can definitely say it wasn't good. Not trying to sound mean, but after 24 years of service he should have known better than to frick around right before he retires. Not an officer, but my ex-boss's son got arrested. He didn't have a license because of a prior driving under the influence of drugs conviction and was on his way to college in Colorado. He was still in Kansas and his mother, who had sworn to boss she would not let him drive, got tired and let him drive. So he goes too fast and gets pulled over. No license. Well, that's trouble. The cop asks permission to search the vehicle and they find pot. He was in an area where simple possession was still a misdemeanor, so still not too bad. Then the cop asks him about his pot use and brain-dead kid says, "Oh officer, I don't smoke it, I just have it so I can sell it when I get to school if I need money." Instant felony. Oh no, that sounds just like my cousin. He told the cop, "No, that's not mine. I'm just taking it to my friends that made it attempt to distribute." There's this guy that was speeding and got pulled over. He had no ID and money on him, so he called his wife, told her he got caught for speeding and asked her to get him his items. In the meantime he started to chat with the cops. He got all interested in how their equipment works, and as he seemed to be a nice guy, the cops let him point the laser gun at a car that was speeding into their direction. Long story short, he caught his own wife who was in a rush to bring him his ID and money. And if she forgot her ID and money, then the vicious cycle continues. My dad was a police officer, and one of my favorite stories of his is when he was chasing a guy who ditched his car and took off during a traffic stop. The guy ran about 1 block, jumped over a concrete barrier and dropped. It was a good 20-foot fall down to the freeway and the guy broke his leg. My dad ran over and looked down as the guy crawled to the middle, climbed, rolled over between the concrete barriers blocking the 2 directions. He called down, "That's a good spot, just hang out there," and then radioed for his partner to bring the car around. Overall the guy was fine, but my dad said he lived in the area and either panicked and forgot where he was or knew he was jumping that far and thought he would make it. Blindly jumping into oblivion like that happens more often than one would think. I'm one of 2 civilian employees at a PD. We get our regulars, and this guy is one of them. Recently, he got out of jail and decided he was going to go visit his girlfriend that same day. The only problem is, she had a no contact order out against him. She calls the police and they come to pick him up. He also had some other illegal things on him, so he got taken straight back to jail. He'd only been out for a few hours. But wait, there's more. So, his girlfriend has a no contact order against him, which isn't like a restraining order where you can't go within a certain distance of them. It's literally no contacting them. Well, this smart guy decides he really wants to talk to his girlfriend, so he called her from jail 3 times. She called the police again and they went back to the jail and added more charges. Violation of a protective order X4. He was smart enough to violate a protective order while he was in jail. Group of friends mug a couple of tourists. One of the muggers is for some reason carrying his own passport, which he drops as they run off. Not quite the same, but I'm continually amazed at the number of drug users who expect to get their stash returned. The first time you're caught with a small quantity of cannabis in the UK, you normally get given a caution there and then on the street. You don't get arrested or anything. I've dealt with more than a couple of people who genuinely expected that interaction will end with me handing back their drugs. You seem to have some crappy friends. My family is good friends with the local sheriff. He's told me a story where an officer pulled over a man who was quite obviously under the influence. When he went to the car to talk to the man, he noticed him making a stabbing motion towards his leg. The man had stabbed himself with a screwdriver and tried to say he'd been stabbed at a bar and was heading out of town, in the direction where the next hospital or clinic was about 45 minutes away, and that's why his driving was wonky. If he'd been caught with another DUI, he'd have lost his license. He ended up losing his license anyways, and had a lot of hospital bills to pay. We've had several over the years who have broken into a house or car and then left on foot following a snowstorm. No need for a canine to track them down. Also had a guy who had shoplifted and he knew we were looking for him in the mall. We found him hiding in a store and also found the weed he had tried to hide in the pocket of a jacket near where he was hiding. He denied the weed being his until I opened up the paper it was crumpled up in. It was his bond paperwork from the day before where he had been arrested for shoplifting. I took him back in front of the same judge who had released him so he could be arraigned on his new charges. She was not happy with him and revoked his prior bond. Also had a guy dine and dash, but left his wallet with it on the table. Not a cop, but know several because of a convenience store job I held where cops came frequently for free coffee and soda. It's related. We were really desperate for third shifters to the point where my boss hired a friend of my coworker. Kid was a complete freaking moron. Had a face tattoo, was small and he was told to keep it covered with makeup which, to his credit, he did. Had to have concepts explained to him multiple times, could barely count change so we had to put him in the back doing stocking. One day, I get called in because he had apparently been arrested. He had apparently offered to sell drugs to another customer in the store, in full view of one of the 4 police officers that were in the store that day. They searched his car and found a mess of pills and pot. According to one of the cops, he claimed that he didn't know that they were in there since it was his mother's car, so they searched her house and found more. Both were arrested. We responded to a bank robbery in progress. Caller surprisingly gives us a good description of both the suspect and the vehicle he got in. Luckily I was only a couple blocks away. I pull on scene and holy crap, matching car is still right out front. I pull and draw down on the suspect. Backup gets there and we get him into custody, no issues. After speaking with the suspect, he was still sitting there because his car wouldn't start and he was sitting there cranking the key trying to get it to start. TLDR, when you rob a bank, leave your car running. Then we could have a funny story about a bank robber getting his car stolen while doing the robbery. Not an officer, but my roommate in college was trying to steal a street sign with a couple other guys. A cop car rolled up with its lights on and they all fled in different directions. Roommate ran a block away through backyards and hid in an open garage. He thought he was free, but a cop on foot found him almost immediately. It had snowed hard earlier that night and he just followed the tracks right to the garage. Guy tried to steal a frozen chicken by putting it under his hat, cooled his head too much and he had a blackout before he could leave the store. I heard a good story once that took place in my hometown, from the halcyon days when light up sneakers were not just for kids. A gentleman with such footwear decided it would be wise to flee on foot from a traffic stop into the pitch dark woods. This happened last week. We get a call to the projects of 620 hours for a domestic, unknown drug apartment. While we are responding, our dispatcher is advising us that the caller, complainant, owns the apartment and that the couple that are staying with her are having the domestic. As we are getting closer, the dispatcher tells us that the couple is breaking everything in the apartment. We get there, everyone is calm, but the apartment has some furniture broken. We run everyone's licenses. The caller, complainant, has an active warrant. She gets arrested and proceeds to resist. Because she is high, the boyfriend has an order of protection against him from his girlfriend who he is standing next to. He gets arrested. The girlfriend admits to breaking the furniture. She gets arrested. 3 for 3. Hilarious. My uncle is a beat cop. He once had to intervene in a brawl between drunk chaps, and a night, apparently, 2 drunk louts decided to harass a street performer dressed in a genuine looking plate armor. It quickly evolved into a hilarious fight where the chavs would wail at the impervious knight and injure themselves by punching edges of steel plate. Before they were separated, one of the chavs was badly messed up by being headbutted by a guy in a steel helmet. Wisely, my uncle and his partner decided to let the knight go, since the guy would normally face charges for using a weapon of sorts during a brawl. Your uncle is a very good man. My dad was a cop in the housing projects in Brooklyn. Once there was a report of trespassing and him and his partner had to clear every floor of this building. They get to the roof and find a man shoving a full, unpeeled banana up his butt. My dad loved telling me this story, and it never fails to make me giggle. We never did find out why he was doing it though. Saw a guy pushing his car through an intersection. When my light turned green I naturally went to investigate. Guy had the hood put up and flagged us down and asked for a jump. Ran the plates as a SOP thing and tags are clean. But they go to blue Toyota and this is a gold Suzuki. Run the VIN on the car and it comes as stolen. Guy says his sister let him drive her car. We say no problem, we'll sort it all out if that's the case. Eventually he asks how he can get his stuff out of the trunk. We say he can get it back after we sort it out since it's his sister's car, right? Then he tells us now the car belonged to some white dudes. I have a bunch of stories. My dad is a RCMP officer and was stationed in Alberta for most of his career. On one occasion some guy was sitting in his attic with a gun waiting to kill police officers that were on their way to his residence. The dog handler was one of the guys that arrived on scene and sent his massive German Shepherd into the house. This thing was apparently pitch black and absolutely ferocious. The dog later died on duty and has a statue in BC. Anyways, this dog got into the attic and chased the gunman down, clamped onto his shoulder with his teeth and started tearing him apart. The guy panicked, fumbled with his gun, and in the ensuing chaos, blew his own head off. Dog was called off and my dad arrived in time to see the guy's body being pulled out of the attic. Group of girls hands me a set of keys they took from a sloppy drunk kid who'd been unsuccessfully hitting them in a popular college bar and tried to get into his car and drive off. Said one of them flirted with him on the driver's side while her friend snuck in on the passenger's side. Find the kid passed out behind the wheel of a car parked nearby. Passenger doors wide open but driver's door is closed and locked. Knocked on the window, strobed my flashlight at him for several minutes. Notice he's got $50 bill sticking out of the CD player like his final act of consciousness was hoping for a Snickers. Finally he wakes up, looks at me, thinks I'm telling him to move along, and tries to start the car but fails because there's no keys. Then he can't figure out how to unlock the car from inside. I figure I'll help him out and use the keys to unlock it, only to find out I'm holding Jeep keys, and he's sitting in a Chrysler. He blames the bar for letting him get so crappy. Still had no idea that wasn't his car. Shows me a military, active duty Marine Corps instead of his regular DL in hopes of getting out of trouble. He's 19. Has no friends to call and doesn't know where he's staying. Spends the rest of the trip to holding begging me not to tell his company. Military police here. Thing about getting into trouble in the service is that for some things, like a DUI, you get into trouble both with us and the local law enforcement. There was this real junior guy who was driving back to his barracks room drunk. Somehow he went completely off the road and crashed into a fire hydrant. Fricked up his new car and did a pretty considerable amount of property damage too. Anyways, this guy decides that before we get there, he is going to leave. That's not so dumb. The dumb part's when he walks back to the scene an hour later, claiming he had his car stolen and this was the first he had seen it. Not only did he still have his keys on him and I guess there was a witness that put him at the scene, but he is also very visibly drunk and injured. He was also underage, which on the civilian side might not count for much, but in the military you can get in a lot of trouble just for that. But when we bring him back to the station, he refuses to tell us who gave alcohol to a minor, which I guess means he's loyal. But when he's in that much trouble already he really should have just told us. Anyways, so in the end the guy not only has to pay hefty ticket, gets knocked down in rank, has to pay for his car and the property damage, but I'm pretty sure he got a dishonorable discharge as well. Getting that kind of discharge takes away pretty much all your benefits and makes it ridiculously hard to find a job. Yep, get a dishonorable and it's like having a felony on your record to potential employers. Not a cop, but I have a few that stand out from friends cops I've interacted with. First, our base's mental health psychologist was married to a highway patrolman. One time they were out at the local harbor with their kids, about to enjoy a late lunch. As they are walking up, about 100 yards away, they see a guy stumbling to his car. He proceeds to get in, and then instead of backing out, he goes forward, into a planter and tree. Her husband casually walks over, reaches in, and takes the keys, cuffs the guy, and calls the local police. He learned as a rookie, always carry his set of cuffs even off duty. You never know. Next one. I was performing honor guard duties for Veterans Day, and they had us presenting the colors with a bunch of local officers. Before the event, we are all hanging out in a room, and we ask, what's the funniest, most fricked up story you have? One local cop says, I have this, and no one will top it. He told us how he had to arrest a 19-year-old for having sex with a 12-year-old in the 19-year-old's van. When they arrested the 19-year-old, he stated, but I thought she was 14. In California, the law is if there is a 5-year or less difference, they won't prosecute unless the parent's victim wants to. Unfortunately, that only applies to minors who are 16 and up, so 14. Still very illegal. Not a cop, but it was a story in my town's newspaper. So, this genius gets the bright idea to shoplift some movies and video games from my local Walmart. He puts the items in his shopping cart, picks up a box cutter from the tool aisle and finds a blind spot in the toy section. While trying to remove the box cutter from its package, he slices his hand open. In his ensuing panic, he throws blood all over the place and runs to the restroom. Security is alerted of the opened package and all they have to do is follow the blood trail and they find the culprit crying and licking his wounds in one of the restroom's stalls. On top of the shoplifting charge, he was also ordered to pay for all the items that got blood on them. I think it was around $250. TLDR. Shoplifter sucks at hide and seek. I don't think they can charge him with shoplifting if he didn't technically steal anything yet. He was still in the store with all the items. Would never hold up in court. My sister is a cop. She once turned on her lights to respond to a robbery, and a nearby car took off. Dispatch told her to pursue the car, as others were also responding to the robbery. After a high-speed chase through a residential neighborhood, he takes off on foot and escapes. In the car, he left a trunk full of ecstasy and his pee-off girlfriend, who tells where he lives. Guy is busted on all kinds of charges for the chase and one of the biggest ecstasy busts in the department's history, all because he saw the lights on the squad car and panicked. What was a moment you said to yourself, dang, I actually am stupid? Me, hey, have you seen my glasses? Her, did you check the fridge? And there they are, just like the 100 other times I can't find my glasses. Why do I put them in the fridge? Because you want to look cool. I'm from the south and dated a girl when I was younger. First time meeting her mom, in a heavy New York accent. She asked me, you like dogs? I said, no thanks, I'm not hungry. It took me way too long to realize she was talking about the two giant pets they had, which were literally in between us, and not freaking hot dogs. My dad is a prankster. When I was about 18 he tried to convince me that Kenny Rogers owned Kroger, and it was really convincing. It didn't help that we called it Kroger's with an S and not Kroger, which is correct. He kept saying, he even named it after himself. Kenny Rogers, K. Rogers. Kroger's. It made sense, but knowing my dad, my balls detector was going off, so I announced that I'll find out once and for all and call the local Kroger and ask. I called, asked for a manager. He gets on the phone and I ask if Kenny Rogers owns Kroger's and relay the argument my dad gave. The dude laughs hard for a solid 2 minutes, thanks me for the best prank call he's had and hung up on me. 25 years later my dad still asks if I found out if Kenny Rogers owned Kroger yet. When someone told me they had the same name as me, I said, really? What's your name? Needless to say, I felt like dying. This one time I was asked to ref a football match, was gonna flip a coin to decide which team would start. I asked for a rep from each team, asked the first guy whether he was picking heads or tails. He picked heads. I asked the other guy what he was going to pick. I asked the other guy what he was going to pick. Rim, please. Found a lost smartphone when walking somewhere. It was the exact same model as my own phone. Dropped it off at the nearest police station so they could contact the owner. Found out later that I had dropped off my own phone instead of the one I found. Given the level of stupid in some of these other stories, I was expecting you to say that you had found your own phone you didn't know was lost. I was friends with some twins. I said happy birthday to one of them. The other asked what about me? My dumbass. Oh crap, is it your birthday too? Yes. Dang, that's crazy, you'll even have the same birth, oh dang. I am actually stupid. I said out loud, wouldn't it be crazy if Halloween fell on a Friday the 13th? It would be crazy because that's not how dates work. To be fair, it would be crazy. One particularly hazy morning I went to the cafe, paid for a cup of coffee, then promptly turned around and walked about a half mile down the block before realizing I never got my coffee. That sucks. Went in to buy gas once, decided to get a fountain drink, gave the clerk a $20 bill, got in my car and promptly drove away. Was only when I looked at my fuel gauge like 10 minutes later I realized what I did. Most expensive Dr. Pepper ever. In the army I was learning how Humvees worked. You have to lock the doors from the inside by slamming down a bar. It's called combat locking the door. Then you put a padlock on the driver door to secure the Humvee. My squad leader taught me a trick to reach through the window and slam down the bar instead of having to crawl through and reach the bar for each door. Then you just push the window up and you are done. I thought I was high speed when I learned this, so the next day when I was showing off my new trick, I locked all 4 Humvee doors faster than anyone. What I forgot was that you are not supposed to combat lock the driver door. This meant the Humvee was completely combat locked and could only be unlocked from the inside. I had to disassemble an armored Humvee door which took hours and was roasted the entire time by everyone around. When you get out to grab coffee at the 7-Eleven and accidentally combat lock your Humvee, ugh, the worst. I was out clothes shopping when I spotted someone I recognized. We made eye contact and smiled at each other. It was just then I realized I was walking towards a full-length mirror. I used to work at a lovely deli around 2-3 years ago. Some of the beverages we offered was fresh, hot coffee. A gentleman walked in and asked for a coffee with lots of cream. Not a problem, says I. I pull out the cream, take the lid off, and my boss reminds me to shake it first. Not a problem. I think again, and shake the open, lidless carton of light cream, sending cream all over the floor, counter, fridge, etc. Everyone in the deli just stopped and stared at me for a few of the longest seconds of my life. Made me rethink so much of my life. I was talking on the phone with my mom. After a while I got frustrated because I couldn't find my phone anywhere. I told my mom about it and she replied, "Wait a second. I'll hang up and then call it so you can find it." I figured out how dumb I was as I was staring the ringing phone in my hand. We had a good laugh about it, but apple really doesn't fall far from the tree. Very similar story, but it was my mom yelling me places to look for the phone while I was on the phone to her. During a dental appointment, my dentist asked me to bite down on this little strip of like sandpaper. Not sure what it's called exactly, but she says okay now tap, 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 but while she said it, she motioned with her hands like this. What she meant was tap my teeth down on the sandpaper a few times. I took it as okay, I'll tap my fingers together, and just mimicked her gesture. She was trying so hard not to laugh at me when I realized what I had done. The paper has a bit of color on it, and when you bite down it leaves a temporary mark where your teeth connect. It is used to test your bite and check that things line up properly. I was preparing to run a 10K race. It was cool, so I was wearing my running suit. Right before I go to the starting line, I'm about to take off the pants and I realize I'm not wearing any shorts underneath. Just Under Armour. I forgot to put them on. Somehow I managed to set a PR. It's become a running joke, no pun intended, that I make sure I'm wearing shorts. I once put on a hoodie cause I was too lazy to put on a bra and shirt, and it was a cool day. Later the day warmed up and I took the hoodie off. I'm truly ashamed of how long it took before the man its breezy thought percolate. I was just out in Green Bay with the titties flapping for a good 5 minutes. In my kitchen I have one cabinet for bowls and plates and another one for cups. This hasn't changed since moving into the house 4 years ago. About 75% of the time, I open the wrong cabinets to get what I need. Even when I try really hard to focus on opening the right cabinet, I still regularly get it wrong. That was the final straw that validated my stupidity. You should put half the plates and cups in one cabinet, and the other half in the other cabinet. Then you're always right. My divorce finalized in early 2017. In late 2017, I got back together with my ex-wife, sitting across from my ex-wife in a Mexican restaurant in late 2019 after our 1000th argument. I very calmly, but firmly, said we're the stupidest people on the freaking planet. She agreed. A couple days later she moved out. This conversation with my boss. I will be in late tomorrow. I have a doctor's appointment. Is everything okay? Yes. Why do you ask? Probably made you seem super suspicious. I was 10, at a basketball tournament out of the city. I told my mother I was going to a friend's room at the hotel we were staying at. He was 3 floors below the room we were staying in. I got in the elevator and pressed floor 6. The doors closed and nothing happened. I pressed floor 6 again. Instant panic shot through my body. Pure sweat dripping down my forehead. I was stuck in an elevator. Instantly, I had to crap. I sat on the floor for 10 minutes, accepting that this is where I was going to die. Not once did it occur to me to press the emergency button. As I sat there and went through how I would die, I figured I might as well press the door open button and see if I could reset the elevator or some magnificent plan. I pressed door open and the elevator doors opened, and there I was, on the 6th floor. I immediately remembered that I was staying on the 6th floor and pressed the same button that was the floor I was staying on. That's why I didn't move. I needed to go to the 3rd floor. Look at the bright side, it would have been worse if you had pressed the emergency button. I put my phone in the freezer to charge. I remember having the thought that it would actually work. Several hours later, I couldn't find my phone. When someone called me, my brain refused to put together that the reason why my fridge was playing music was that my phone was in it. I just thought it was a feature I had missed. OMG, this one had so many levels. Forgot to check the oven before preheating. Set a forgotten pizza box on fire. Husband will never let me live it down. It was several years ago. Here's one. My wife threw a graduation party for me. She bought corn on the cob to make. I put it in the oven in the plastic grocery bags to store it for later. Hours go by, and I preheat the oven for something and go outside. I made plastic dipped corn on the cob for our guests. I was in my late 30s before I realized you can raise the lever on the toaster to lift up the toast and easily grip it, instead of playing operation with your fingers in the toaster slots. Say what now? Age, 64. My BF was weighing our suitcases the night before a flight. He did the classic, step on the scale and then step on the scale with the suitcase and do the math technique. One of the bags was a couple of kg over the limit, so I reassured him that by morning he will have lost a bit of weight, which might help get back under the limit. Didn't think that one through. I was working with my deaf co-worker and the store we worked at was having a sale on AirPod Pros. I forgot he wouldn't be able to use them and was miming to him that he should buy some. He just pointed to his ears and shook his head. Then to make it worse, I kept trying to sign to him that I was sorry and kept signing thank you instead. He at least got a good laugh out of it. I'm deaf. My boyfriend asked me what wireless earbuds I would recommend. I just stared at him and pointed to my hearing aid. I spent a good 45 seconds trying to open a can of beans with a can opener and couldn't for the life of me figure out what I was doing wrong. I remember thinking it had been a while since I'd opened a can, but really? Then I took a good, hard look at what I was doing and realized I was trying to open a can with a potato peeler. I had swapped a different engine into my car. Got around to the point where I was ready to do startup. Go to fire it up and nothing. Not getting any fuel pressure. Fuel pump was priming. Wasn't a leak anywhere. Tear the fuel cell apart. Pull the pump out. Rig up a bucket of fuel, test the pump. Seems to be working fine. Put the fuel cell back together. Must be a plugged filter. Pull the filter, can blow through it fine, shouldn't be stopping the fuel. Finally dawned on me after an hour of fricking around. I've been pulling apart the whole fuel system and there isn't ethanol on everything. Freaking fuel cell is empty. Put some fuel in the car and you wouldn't believe it, but it made fuel pressure. I'm a freaking idiot. Based on everything you said, I can assure you that you aren't an idiot. You sound like a damned wizard. I work in IT. I'm so convinced I can fix any problem on my computer. I almost never reboot the dang thing as a step one, despite the fact that that's what I always tell people to try first. Not me, but my sister had this realization when I challenged her confident proclamation that she wanted to sit at the back of the roller coaster to get a longer ride. She will get a faster ride down the hills though. Typically 3/4 to the back is the best place to sit if you want the best pops of airtime. I was at a young age, 8ish, when I thought the Star-Spangled Banner said Jose, do you see? That was a moment. Reading is fundamental, kids. I thought the line in this land is my land was from California to the New York Highlands rather than New York Island. I had been going to this campsite a few times in this really isolated Bureau of Land Management area by a lake. It was a great campsite, but you had to hike 1.5 miles with your tent and bags and everything through rocks and crevices and crap. It was a little bit difficult. So I get the idea to buy a small inflatable boat at Dong's Sporting Goods. Put all my crap on there and paddle across this huge lake. It was almost 2 miles across, so I would land right by the campsite. Turns out the boat was not that sturdy. All my crap fit in there, but the two oars were all plasticine and the sides were not very sturdy. Also, I forgot to pack a life jacket. That's the first time I thought, dang, I actually am stupid. Also, it was so windy on that fateful September day, just gusts of wind non-stop. I start rowing across the lake and right away my oar just breaks right in half. Frickin' plastic made in China thing just snapped. I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. Only down to 1 oar? So I start rowing some more, but the boat was really made for 2 oars and it was going wonky with just 1. I tried to row harder on one side and the frickin' oar just slipped right out of my hand into the water. Here's where I make the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't even think about it. I just jumped into the water to grab the oar. As soon as I leapt off the boat, the wind just took that frickin' boat flying across the water. I was like, no no no. And I swam after it, but it was getting swept away a lot faster than I could swim. And then suddenly it was gone. I'm out in the middle of this abandoned lake bobbing up and down in the waves with no life jacket. No nothing. I was like, well, today is the day I die. I couldn't do anything. I started screaming for help, but there were no people anywhere. No cars. Nothing. I tried to bob up and down in the water, but it was taking all my energy just to stay afloat and I wasn't getting anywhere. I said, well, old sport, today is the day you die. I don't know why this experience turned me into F. Scott Fitzgerald, but on this day it did. I was thinking, might as well give up and drown. But then I realized I didn't want to die. I wanted to see my kids and I was in a fight with one of my brothers and I forgot to make up. My life was getting better and I was traveling and crap. Too many reasons to live. I told myself, be the boat, be the boat. The boat made it to shore. You can too. I started swimming as hard as I could and it was the toughest thing I have ever done in my life. My arms cramped, my legs cramped, my stomach cramped. When I finally hit the shore and could stand up, I just looked up at the stars and started crying. Altogether I had been in the water without any flotation more than 2.5 hours. Quite a featuring, but no matter what, that day I realized, dang, I actually am stupid. Was a bit distracted while unloading my shopping. Accidentally put my novel in the freezer and ice cream on the shelf. Didn't notice until the next day. By that time the ice cream was spoiled and the book was mildly iced over. This made me laugh on an empathetic level. Not me, but I work in a call center and just spoke to a woman a minute ago. I told her to have her husband call us before we close at midnight EST, in about 4 hours. She asked me, is that 4 hours my time? Since being concussed, I won't say I wasn't stupid before the concussion, but I know for sure I'm stupider now and it's a strange sense of loss. Open drawer to look for something. Don't see what I need. Start a close drawer. Spot thing I wanted in the first place. Reach hand back in while still closing drawer with other hand. Shut hand and drawer. Sometimes once you commit to emotion. Deployed. Heard word of an unidentified drone flying relatively close to our area. So I'm just sitting there staring up at the night sky. I really have never seen a drone during the night time, so I didn't really know what altitude to expect them to be flying at, or if they had lights on. So I was pretty clueless. This dim light catches my eyes as I'm scanning the sky and I focus in on it. The light seems to be getting bigger and bigger, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I ended up calling it up over the radio for the guys I was working with to come outside and take a look. They came outside. looked at the light in the sky I was pointing at, looked back at me, and then called me a dumbass. It was clouds slowly drifting in front of the moon. So I think that one was a mix of my own stupidity and tiredness. I traveled to Paris by myself when I was 18. I stupidly assumed that my Canadian high school French would be sufficient to converse in French in France. I very quickly discovered that was not the case. This, however, was not the moment of stupid. The moment of stupid was when I was lost somewhere in Paris trying to find my hotel. I decided I needed to ask someone for help but knew I needed to find someone who spoke English. So I walk up to a clerk and intend to ask, do you speak English and French? But my brain shorts and I get the stupid. So instead I ask this clearly French man in Paris, France, parlez-vous français? Do you speak French? He gave me the most dumbfounded and exasperated "oui" I've ever heard. Before I corrected myself. You should have replied, good because I don't en français of course. I was shocked to learn that hearts and diamonds are always red cards and spade and clubs are always black in a deck of cards. I was told last night and felt so dumb. I've played poker. Ah, so that's their names in English. It would have been the mid to late 90s, hanging out at a friend's, listening to records and smoking pot. Friend put on his new Green Day Dookie album. I definitely know the lyrics to the song Basket Case and have no issue with singing them with gusto. Me. Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mom plays tricks on me. My friend. Did you just say mom? Me. Yeah. Reading my shampoo bottle and it said 30 uses. I thought of 1. Shampoo and 2. Emergency body wash before I thought of 3. I am an idiot. After a year or so of living in this condo and thinking that it sucked I didn't have a fan or light over my oven. I pressed the wrong button on the microwave and voila, light went on. I'm ashamed to admit how long it took me to realize I had a microwave oven range unit. I once talked to my GF about the impressive records of Cristiano Ronaldo in football. Literally in her next sentence she asked, how old is Ronaldo? To which I stupidly replied, who's Ronaldo? I worked seasonally for a jewelry store in college. They had a trunk show scheduled for Halloween Day and I was told to dress up. So I dressed up in a shark costume only to realize upon arrival that they meant dress up. Fancy. A customer dropping mad cash on an anniversary ring for his wife laughed and asked if I'd drawn a short straw. Nope. Just turns out I'm a freaking idiot. You earned the belly laugh. Absolutely freaking out to a friend that I couldn't find my phone anywhere. While talking to them on my phone. Yes, I was completely sober. Not me, but my sister. One time, she went to go put a glass of water in the microwave to help keep her food moist, but the glass was too tall. Instead of getting a smaller glass out of the cabinet, she poured half the water out into the sink. The glass still wouldn't fit in the microwave, and she realized after what she had done. This reminds me of a quote from a scientist documentary where they had to work at high altitudes with less oxygen in the air. He called someone at the base and said, I've cut the line 3 times and it's still not long enough. One time I went to the pet shop to buy a hamster. I bought a huge cage for him, some food, but when I went home, I realized that I forgot to buy hamster. I was peeing in a urinal. Then I think I accidentally walked into the girls' bathroom. I couldn't leave because I was peeing. So I was just terrified some girl was going to walk in and see me. I finished peeing, went to the sinks, and realized how stupid I was. I found a spoon in my freezer and while thinking why is this spoon in the freezer I licked it. My tongue got stuck and I pulled the spoon fast off my tongue. I then bled for a while after as I had torn my tongue in several spots. Think of the smartest person you know. What is the dumbest thing they've ever done? Guy with a PhD in chemistry had a problem with electric furnace. It kept switching off the circuit breakers. So he was told by someone to stick a wooden splinter in it to keep the switch up, but it was too weak and the gap in the breaker too narrow. So he took some strip of metal instead. Well, he still lives but he said he almost shat himself. That's 2 levels of amazingly bad air. The metal is obviously dumb. But the advice is absolutely awful as well. If you have a breaker tripping, never just jam it. There is a reason it is tripping. At best the breaker itself is defective. but more likely the appliance is faulty, and if you jam the breaker you're going to get someone killed or the house burned down. My brother was in uni in the UK and needed a toaster. He ordered on off of Amazon for £3 and was surprised to find one so cheap. Turns out it was a kid's toy. It came with plastic pieces of bread as well. Hey, I'm gonna buy a really cheap car. My friend has a master's degree in mechanical engineering and robotics. He once made a potato salad with raw potatoes because he thought, since it's a salad, you're not supposed to cook it. This is the kind of real world practical thing my friend would screw up. I love it. Friend of my mother's, PhD in biology, specialized in mushrooms. She was also a bit of an artist and carved wood with bacteria in her spare time. She'd previously tried to do it with fungus and, well, it wasn't fast enough. After a few years of carving with bacteria she decided they weren't fast enough either. So she switched to insects. Ordered banned beetles from Japan, illegal insecticide from South America, and went to town carving faces in wood. Except that the government had noticed. When she got raided there were 6 federal agencies and at least as many from the state: FBI, EPA, D, FWS, USDA, CBP. Hurrah. I'm a professor of biology at college. Worked great. The DNFBI were willing to overlook her coca-based insecticide, considering that she was eligible to purchase it with a couple of forms. The EPA and CBP didn't care about her illegal boring beetles for much the same reason. Fish and Wildlife didn't even know why they were there. The problem was the USDA. During the search of her house they found a bag of the fungus that causes Dutch elm disease, open, on the kitchen counter, next to the toaster oven. She even got out of that. My sister, my wonderful sister, so intelligent, educated, but dang. They had their house inspected and the inspector found an issue with their gas heat. Called in a repairman and it turns out they were having lower levels of carbon monoxide leaking into their home. When my mom asked her why she didn't have several working detectors she answered, well I did, but one just wouldn't quit beeping. This was 10 years ago and we still bring it up all the time. Thankfully everyone turned out to be okay, but that wouldn't have been the case much longer. My dad is a software engineer and pretty smart. When my twin and I were about 7 he was the only one home with us when he started coughing up blood. Except he didn't tell anyone and decided to just wait for my mom to get home instead of getting someone else to look after us and going to the hospital. My mom was so pee when she got home and he casually mentioned the coughing up blood thing. Turned out he had bronchopneumonia and had to spend a couple weeks in the hospital. Even had to have his heart stopped and started again. He almost died because he decided coughing up blood wasn't an emergency. Even had to have his heart stopped and started again. He truly was a software guy. I have a neighbor. He is by far the smartest person I know. A couple 4th of Julys ago he got a quarter stick of dynamite and strapped it to an RC boat with a detonate button and a timer. He sent it out on the lake at night, flipped the switch and it didn't go off. So he took it back into the house to fix it, but never turned the detonate button off. So when it was fixed the 7-second timer started going. It ended up going off in the house and blowing out all of the windows. Everyone was safe. TLDR, my neighbor blew up his house. It's like an episode of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Easy. Dad's an actuary, basically a cross between a mathematician and an economist. Wrote a textbook for his field and has been CEO of several very large companies. I came home many years ago to hear Age of Empires blaring at 1,000,000 dB. That's odd. I wandered downstairs to find him playing the game, with headphones on, but unplugged. He had the sound turned up on the speakers because he couldn't hear it over the dampening of the headphones. To top it off, he had the headphones on backwards. To this day makes me smirk. At least it wasn't pee. There's probably some poor editor with that sad tale. Girl I know has a master's in chemistry and still thought she could get away with casual MUs as if that is a thing. My sister, not smart at all actually, once told me she accidentally did M the other day. My blank stare prompted her to clarify. I thought it was C much better. Brother-in-law is a pretty clever guy. Ran a bath for his kid. Couldn't get the tap to turn off. Mad panic. Rang a plumber friend asking him to come round quick or the house is gonna flood. friend was like, "You could just pull the plug. Real nice, real clever guy. Zero common sense." A lot of people are only used to things going right and working as they should. When things don't, they become complete vegetables. Where we are, you don't mess with jellyfish. They frick you up. My partner, post-grad quals, civil engineer, super rational, smart, measured, not at all impulsive human being walking along the water's edge at the start of jellyfish season. Sees a mass in the water that looks like a jellyfish. Kicks the mass. Toe connects with mass. Frick, it was a rock. Having gotten over my amazement at the stupidity I just witnessed, I pocketed the rock. Gave it to him as a congratulations at your amazing career promotion. Just to remind him he is not immune to errors of judgment. Amazing foresight. I'd have that on my desk forever. I did my undergrad with a guy who got an almost perfect score on his MCAT but also ate a raw chicken breast because he thought it was a really bad Hot Pocket. He was sober. Edit. For all those asking, it was one of those individually packaged breaded and stuffed chicken breasts that was frozen. He thought it was an off-brand Hot Pocket, microwaved it for a minute or however long you usually cook a Hot Pocket for and chowed down. He ate it so fast he didn't really question why it was so slimy, or still frozen. Another time, when he was in early high school, maybe 14 years old, his mom was making his lunch and feeding the cat at the same time. She worked 3 jobs and is a real-life angel, and mixed up the cat food with the can of tuna for his tuna salad sandwich. So he has also eaten a cat food sandwich. He figured that one out after the fact but was too polite to say anything to his very tired mom. He's a surgeon now. My friend once ate a frozen burger from the freezer because what's the difference if it's hot or cold? He, however, was an idiot. My older brother was the high school valedictorian and decided to cut an apple with a large knife while holding it in his hand. He has a lovely scar from it. Oh my god, my now husband then boyfriend did that in my dad's kitchen. He cut his finger, ran to the bathroom, refused to sit down or let me help him, and proceeded to faint. Also, this was the first time my husband met my dad, so solid first impression. They used their bare hand to check if the stove was still hot by pressing it directly on the burner, and they had 2 doctorates. My dad, TAFE professor, got his mortgage down to $20,000 and had the opportunity to pay it all. Redrew and bought a brand new car. Total car. Bought another brand new car. Gave it to girlfriend at the time. Girlfriend left and kept car. Currently owes $250,000 on his same mortgage. Wow, that is spectacularly stupid. No offense. My buddy, who is now a brilliant emergency medicine doctor, at one point while sledding bet he could jump off his moving sled over a flat bench and land on the sled while moving. He realized he couldn't position to jump and crashed ribcage into the bench. But dumbest genius I have ever met. Sounds like his career origin story. My older brother, hands down one of the smartest people I've ever had the privilege of knowing, once got incredibly drunk and wrote "butt" in big black permanent marker on the right butt cheek of an acquaintance who was wearing a brand new pair of like $85 white jeans. Never seen him look so ashamed while giving money to a person for clothing. I mean, he did label it right. My husband, he's a mathematician for the feds, but he has repeatedly gotten us to the wrong airport in cities that have more than one, like at least 3 times. He's brilliant, but a moron. I'm also married to a mathematician. I feel your pain. I wouldn't trust him to plan or navigate any kind of travel, ever. I lived in Colorado Springs. My friend came into town and was booked into a hotel. I called and asked for the name or address of the hotel and he told me he did not know, but he could see the mountains from where he was. He narrowed his location down to a time zone. My dad is the smartest person and anyone who knows him know, and once when we were kids he tried to make us laugh by sticking peas in his nostrils and ended up accidentally snorting them up into his nasal passages. Best part, he's an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. One of the best in the region. I can still hear him pleading with my mother to take them out because he couldn't face his colleagues with peas up his nose that he voluntarily put there. My sister once put something like 17 peas in her nose. She shot them out in a machine gun snot rocket blast that was captured in an amazing photo that I can't find. They didn't all come out though, and the last one worked its way out several hours later. I was picking up my date, future wife, when her valedictorian roommate turned quickly away from the TV and said in all seriousness, "Don't look. They are welding. It will damage your eyes." She got more serious as I continued to look back and forth at the TV and her. She actually yelled, "It's going to blind you." I then asked her, "So when your TV is showing an image of the sun?" That's as far as I got. You could see the wave of embarrassment wash over her face. She immediately started crying and begged me not to tell anyone. And yet here you are, spilling the beans. My aunt, college professor, PhD in mathematics, was blown away when watching my father cook rice without a rice cooker. Throughout my whole life, I've never actually seen someone IRL cook rice with a rice cooker. Told me that they believe sex scenes in movies were real and didn't understand how the actor's significant others handled it. This person is a doctor. My friend in college graduated summa cum laude with a double major in biology and chemistry. She went on to medical school and became a physician in a hospital you've definitely heard of. One day she put a fork in the microwave when heating up a bowl of green beans, and I had to explain to her why the microwave sounded like it was full of firecrackers. For some reason this is the story that finally reminded me that these people are literally just children that start doing advanced school stuff and never stop. And then one day they are at the top of their class and in Harvard or some crap. But they are still a 23-year-old that doesn't know how to use a microwave. I have a grandfather who was an extremely talented criminal who used to rob store safes. One time he robbed a safe while posing as an inspector without even being noticed. He eventually turned himself in after starting a family, having my mom, then summarily escaped from prison, and managed to create a fake identity with a loophole that has now been closed. He lived with a fake last name for several years until he was eventually caught. However, he managed to negotiate for a pardon by explaining the loophole he used to create his fake name. It was either the mayor or the governor, I forget. He went free and got a job as a maintenance guy. Then he retired and gave all of his money to a scam televangelist and now lives in poverty. That was unironically a whole journey, dude. This needs to become a movie. My colleague was tasked to put mail into the mailbox. She asked me where it is and what it looks like. Around the corner, and it's a red box. Turns out, there is another red box marked general waste. About 2 meters away is the red box that spells out Australia Post. She's been throwing away mail. Given their reliability, it's what Australia Post would have done anyway. I don't know if he's necessarily the smartest person I know, but I know a pretty smart astrophysicist who pointed out a star to us which was in fact a plane. That's awesome, in all senses of the word. My brother has PhDs in bioengineering. We were on a call one day and he was saying, "I can't find my phone. Probably my kids took it." Didn't realize until I told him that he was using his phone to talk to me. You are always at your dumbest around siblings. Called me at 2:30 AM to ask a work question. No problem. It was part of the job and project we were on. He then called me back at 3:45 AM to say, "I just wanted to say thanks. That worked just like you said it would." No tact at all. In fact, I bet he thought you'd appreciate the good news. My best friend is a researcher for space stuff at a top university in the United States and is getting her PhD and master's simultaneously. She has several computer science math degrees and graduated with honors. She's the smartest a lot of people know. I'm very proud of her. That being said, her list of common sense things is rather low. I've had to explain to her exactly why picking up hitchhikers is a no-no. Why hiking along trails alone and deep woods alone is dangerous. But truly the take the cake, the incident that happened when we were freshmen in college. We went to different colleges several hours and different states away but talked weekly. 10 years later, we still do. Anyway, she calls me saying her clothes stink and she had washed them several times without wearing them. I ask what kind of detergent she's using and she says Tide. I say that it's probably the from washing machines and they're never cleaned and to get some fresh or vinegar. She agrees and says, maybe I should use detergent more often. Jazz music stop. What, wait? I sputtered out in my hysterical sobs of laughter. Listen, smartest person I know. You have to use laundry detergent every single time you wash clothes, and that's why they stink. As a child, she thought her parents were just being frivolous using it every time. I asked her what she thought it was really for, and she thought it was to keep the washing machine clean and was terribly upset that her detergent budget had increased after I told her. TLDR. My astrophysicist bestie was taking her clothes on a field trip through the washing machine and didn't understand the purpose of laundry detergent. That's adorable. My one college professor had a double doctorate, several masters, and was the head of the national magazine for his field and had a lot of respect in the science community. He didn't know electric eels were real, like he argued with us. To be fair, the concept of electric eels is really freaking weird. My mother, Oxford mathematics graduate with no parental leg up, shall we say, aka not from a posh family or anything, had her IQ tested officially in a proctored exam and got 163. Mensa member till she realized what kind of person joins Mensa. This woman cannot understand time zones, which is ironic because her family lives in Australia, Hong Kong, the UK and the east and west coast of America. She never knows when it's appropriate to be calling anyone, and you may get a random call from her at 3 AM. But we love her anyway. Get her a world clock, with multiple cities, preferably digital, with MPM shown. A friend of mine, 4.0 GPA unweighted, 35 ACT, 36 super score, smart butt kid, but he went running barefoot in 101 degrees weather on a gravel road because he wanted to increase his pain tolerance. My dad, he had one of his ears pierced when he was in college. He went to a party wearing an earring. A girl started talking to him and decided to give him one of her earrings, but he didn't want to take his earring out, so he stabbed her earring through his unpierced earlobe. This man is now an engineer. Your dad is metal as frick. My friend M is really good at math. She literally minored in it for fun. One day, we were walking along, and she said, "Guys, I saw something on Facebook this morning. We're only 81 years from the year 3000. This was in 2019. I thought she was making fun of the silly Facebook people. Then she said, "Isn't that crazy?" And then I realized that my friend who enjoyed calculus genuinely thought that 2019 plus 81 equals 3000. I had to break it to her gently. I will never let her live it down. To be fair, most math she's doing probably doesn't involve any numbers. Doesn't explain why she forgot basic math, but definitely makes me feel better about struggling with 7x8. My brother's friend was high school valedictorian. In college, he gathered up deer turds to play a practical joke on his roommate by putting said deer turds into a box of Cocoa Puffs cereal. 2 days later, he forgets about the deer turds and goes to pour himself a bowl of Cocoa Puffs. Instead of nice, sugary cereal, he gets a spoonful of deer turds. Justice. Had a roommate who was working on their PhD in psychology get mad at me for leaving the washer on the hot water setting. She was upset because she didn't think she could get her jeans to stretch back out to fit her. When I said they're cotton so they should stretch back, she said they're denim not cotton. I even asked her to check the tag, but her thumb was covering the one, so she said they're 0% cotton. Eventually I got her to move her thumb, and believe me, really nice roommate and a lovely person. She finished her PhD just fine, and I'm sure she's a great psychologist, just not the best at laundry. My brother is one of, if not the smartest person I know. 36 on his ACT, likely on the spectrum. He moved out to Nashville at 19 to try to become a rock star and moved back about 9 months later because of issues with his landlord. He left his drums, a couple guitars and his entire wardrobe behind because frick that guy. Probably lost something like $2K worth of crap doing that. And the landlord gained $2K worth of crap. I graduated with someone who got a perfect SAT score, but managed to cut off 2 fingers in shop class while trying to make a birdhouse. My late father was a particle physicist. He understood things that, I think I'm not being hyperbolic here, only about 5000 people understand. He was on a team that worked on the calculation of the mass of the Higgs boson. His team got it wrong. In addition to being a particle physicist, He was also an avid student of history and completed 2 bachelor's degrees at MIT, one in physics, one in history. Mind you, that's not a double major, but 2 degrees in 4 years. Anyway, that guy got done in by a 2-bit con job at an ATM in the late 90s. They wrote him a bum check for $200 or something and he gave them cash. The first that comes to mind is my friend from back in high school. He loved and stressed over his academics. A straight A, color-coded binder, schedules time to study French in his free time. Kinda student. And I will never forget the time he went to take a bite of pizza, completely missed his mouth, and bit down so hard he chipped his front tooth. He had to go to the dentist over it. My brother is a EMT firefighter that spends his free time exploring the outdoors, traveling, and reading every book on the planet. Super interesting to talk to, and the amount of knowledge and experience this man has had in his young life is absolutely mind-blowing. That being said, when we were teens at a party he was drunk as almighty heck and someone dared him to eat some grass. Who knows why? And he grabs as much as he can in the backyard and starts munching away saying, "Oh, so good, might be the best thing I've ever had, Harry." And that's when I saw that he also had a mouthful of dog shit that must have been on that grass he grabbed. When I told him, he puked on the spot. I love that intellectual idiot. I had a buddy in school for mechanical engineering. Very bright, but a little on the cocky side. He ended up moving to DFWTX area, ended up getting on M, losing his job, then into selling it, then stealing high-dollar bicycles at the nearby college campus, ends up getting caught with felony theft and M distribution. Now he's on felony probation for 10 years, and lost his college scholarship. Yet man, MH can ruin anyone's life. Just open the door for them. My dad is dang near genius. The man has no less than 17 patents, most of them about medical devices like infusion pumps. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about the University of Chicago's mascot, which happens to be a phoenix. Now, University of Chicago athletes are known as Maroons. My dad looked at the phoenix and said, "So that's what a maroon is?" I said, "What? Dad, maroon is a color." He didn't believe me until I found a color wheel type thing showing maroon. Turns out when he was a kid he used to watch a lot of Looney Tunes, where Bugs would say what a maroon in reference to dumb people. He spent his whole life thinking a maroon was some kind of animal akin to a dodo bird. Got married due to family pressure. Super talented scientific mind. Had 70+ publications before getting married. Now admits that his pace has not only slowed down, but wife is edging him to change profession because scientific research doesn't pay as per her expectations. Research is about passion and curiosity, not dollars. Tried to smuggle drugs across the American-Canadian border. Don't know what drugs it was, but it was still incredibly stupid of him to think just putting it in his backseat was gonna work. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.